Hello there, everybody, and we're going to study Parashas Va'era. Since we only have one time to meet this week, I wanted to focus on the plagues. We're not going to be able to do all 10 plagues, but I wanted to just go through some of the plagues. We'll see how far we can go with the commentary of Rashi, with the commentary of the Balaturim, with the commentary of the Hasidic Rebbe's, with the commentary of the Midrashim. And after we do that, maybe we'll have some idea of what's the purpose of the 10 plagues, or at least what's the purpose of one of the plagues, so we can go from there. Hold on one second. Just 1 second. Okay. Okay. So let us begin with the first plague, which is really the plague of blood. It's interesting that the plague of blood, when God introduces it, does not begin a new paragraph. It's in the middle of the previous paragraph, which is talking about how he is supposed to meet Pharaoh. This is the very introduction to the plagues. Is not saying I'm going to bring a plague upon the Egyptians, but the first verse is that you're supposed to meet Pharaoh at the water. And we'll see why. Let's go to chapter 7, verse 14. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe, God said to Moshe, Kaved lev Paro. Pharaoh's heart is heavy. Now this is a whole, there's a whole discussion of what does it mean Pharaoh's heart is heavy. It's stubborn, or what does it mean? We're not going to get into that. He does not want to send away the people. So now, verse 15, and I think this is going to tell us a lot about what the purpose of the plagues are. Rechel Paro, God says to Moshe, go to Pharaoh, Baboker, in the morning. Hine yotzei maima. Behold, he's going out to the water. V'nitzavta likrato. You should rush out to greet him, or you shall stand opposite him. Al sfat hayor, by the banks of the river. V'amate asher napach u'nachash tikach biadecha. And the staff which had turned into a nachash, you shall take in your hand. Right away, before we even look at the commentaries, we notice that to introduce the plagues, Moshe is told to meet Pharaoh by the banks of the Al Sfat Hayor, the banks of the river. This is not the first time we see the river. Pharaoh had a dream that Joseph interpreted, which took place by the river. That was the dream of the 7 cows, Olos, and Ayaor, that the 7 cows went up from the river. And now we have Pharaoh standing by the banks of the river. And we know that the water, he says, go out to the water is ultimately going to be the doom of Pharaoh. That Pharaoh's men will be tossed and drowned in the river. Now it seems very clear that the tone is being set to specifically meet Paro by the water. Why the water? We have to imagine that in Egypt, the Nile then, and who knows what it is now, was the center of the economy, but not only the center of the economy, the center of their theology. And Rashi is going to make that point. But basically, Moshe Rabbeinu was going to the heart of Egyptian society, a society that viewed Pharaoh as all-powerful, and attacking that center. Let me just pause for a moment before we read the Rashi. And let's see what Rashi says here. This is a Rashi that I remember studying as a little boy. And I was thinking something, but now that I'm older, I look at it differently. Rashi says, why should he go out to the water and meet him there? How did he know that Paro would be going out to the water in the morning? Rashi says, Lin Kavav. Pharaoh used to go out in the morning to relieve himself. But here Rashi says something which I think is so on point. Rashi says it in his words, but sociologists and anthropologists and Bible scholars would say in their own words, but they're saying the same thing. Rashi says, Shaya osa atzmo Eloha. Paro was making himself into a god. And he was saying, Sheino tzarchin kavav. Paro was pretending, claiming he never needed to go to the bathroom. Umashkim v'yotze lanius. He would get up early and go to the Nile, the osa sham tzrachav. He'd go to the bathroom in the Nile and claim the rest of the day, I didn't have to go to the bathroom. I never have to go to the bathroom. So Moshe was meeting him by the river. Why? Because he knew he would be there. But more to the point, he was exposing him and demonstrating that I know your secrets. You're no God. He was puncturing the myth that Pharaoh was their God. It's not a surprise that the first plague is to attack the center of the Egyptian economy, to attack the source of divinity of Pharaoh, and to say, we do not believe you're a God. To say, we do not believe you're a God. So that's the concept here. That's the concept here. Hold on one second. Okay, so now the verse says, V'amarte elav, you should say to Pharaoh, when you see him, Hashem Elkei Avrim, Shalachani Elecha, the God of the Hebrews sent me to you. Leimor Shalachas Ami B'Avduni, send my people out. They will serve me Bamidbar in the wilderness. You have not listened until now. And now we get to the first plague. Koamar Hashem, this is what God says, Bizos Teidah, with this you shall know, Ki Ani Hashem, this you shall know that I am God. Anochi makeh b'mateh asher biyadi. I am going to strike with the staff that's in my hand, al mayim asher ba'or, on the water that's in the river, v'ne'apchu adam, and it will turn into blood. And Rashi, right away, and he's basically like I would say he's a sociologist, but I don't want to in any way, God forbid, diminish Rashi. But Rashi says, why did they attack the Nile first? Egypt was not a place with rain. The Nile went up and watered the earth, irrigated it. The Egyptians worshipped the Nile. God struck right away their God. And only afterwards did he strike them. So right away, the first point is attacking the central belief system, the axiom of Egypt, and that's the concept. And it's almost like Macbeth, with the Lady Macbeth, with the blood. Here's the Nile, which was the source of the blood of the Egyptians. And at the same time, the Nile, which Pharaoh had thrown the Jewish babies into the Nile, is now like becoming filled with blood. A very clear statement. Now, Egyptian society at its center is built on the blood of the Jewish babies. I want to also read the Baal HaTurim. And the Baal HaTurim says as follows. It says in the verse, Al Hamayim, strike with the staff on my hand. The Baal HaTurim says that This phrase appears 4 times. 4 times in the entire Bible. It appears here, by or. Then it appears again later on in Exodus when it says, Vayachanu sham alamayim, that when they camped at Elim, there were 12 springs on the water. And it appears a third time with respect to the purification process of a person who had saras, the process of purification from leprosy. It says the blood of the bird that was slaughtered on the living water. And also the fourth time it appears in Kings, chapter 3, verse 22, where it says, the sun shone upon the water from afar. The Moabites saw the water as red blood. All of these cases is talking about, well, actually, I don't know about all these cases, but the Baal HaTurim is saying, if we look at these other cases, some of them have to do with blood as well. So the Mitzorah is you sprinkle the blood and you pour it into the water. And also the Moabites saw the sun was shining on the water, and they saw the reddish blood that was there. And so those two verses have to do with blood, even though the what happened at Elim is not so clear. So in these three cases, you have the blood on the water, and then the Baal HaTurim says, in the merit of the commandment filled with water, the Israelites merited to find the 12 springs of water. Maybe it's the commandment of the Mitzorah. So what the Baal HaTurim seems to be understanding is that based upon the other two cases, there was blood in the water, not that the whole water turned to blood, but that there was blood in the water. So some want to say that the water turned to blood for a short period of time and then changed back to water. And then what happened was all the fish died, and that caused the water of the river to remain foul for 7 more days. So that's the Baal HaTurim's understanding of what happened in the plague of the blood. That it turned for a moment, all the fish died, and then it ruined the water system for the next 7 days. So you have to understand. Can you imagine? I mean, I just want to put this out there. Right? If our water system went down for 1 day, God forbid, can you imagine the mass panic that would be in the area? Everybody would be panicking. And not only was the water affected, look at what the next verse says, and then we'll look at some of the Hasidic commentaries. Va'adaga asher ba'or tamut, uva'ash ha'or. The fish died, so the water was ruined. They couldn't use it because it was blood. Then all the fish died. Uva'ash ha'or. The river became putrid. V'nilu Mitzrayim l'shtod mayim min ha'or. The Egyptians stopped drinking the water from the river. They stopped. Rashi says here, again, also incredibly powerful, right? Psychological point about the panic and the defeat that was taking over the Egyptians right away, even after just the first plague. What does it mean the Egyptians grew tired of drinking from the river? Rashi says it means they stopped trying to even find a way to drink the water. Meaning not that they got tired from drinking the water, But levakish refuah lemei hayor shayu ru'uyin l'shtot. They stopped trying to find a reason or a remedy to drink the waters. They didn't want to do it anymore. They stopped. They're like, we give up. Psychologically, at this point, the Egyptians already grew tired. And that's the most devastating thing about the plague of the blood, was that the Egyptians started to give up hope. There's a commentary on this. So there's a commentary from the El Amiluim. He asked a couple of questions on this Rashi. He says we need to go a little bit deeper into this Rashi. He says, first of all, what is Rashi referring to when he says they stopped trying to find a remedy, a refuah for the waters? Why only for this plague did they seek a medicine? Also, why does it say in the verse they grew tired of drinking the water min hayor? They grew tired of drinking the water from the river, but didn't it say above? It states that all the water turned into blood, even though the Baal HaTurim said it wasn't all the water, it was just some. So this is what the El HaMiluim says. He says we could say that it appears in the Midrash that the plague of blood made the Jewish people very wealthy. Another damaging factor about the plague of blood. Not only were the Egyptians defeated, disheartened, but the Israelites became extraordinarily successful, because when the Egyptians drew water, it was blood. But that same water, when it was that same blood in the hands of the Israelites, turned back into water. And then the Israelites were turning around and selling bottled water to the Egyptians at a very steep markup. So that is only by the river water that turned into blood on account of the punishment of the Egyptians. And so therefore, in the hands of the Jews, of the Israelites, it was water. But the Nile, where it began, why? So basically, there's two different types of water. What he's explaining is that the rivers in general, they turned into blood as a punishment for the Egyptians. But the Nile turned into blood because God punished their God first. And so therefore, since he was just destroying their God, it didn't matter who had it. And so therefore, they had no ability to ever drink it, meaning to say the other water, they could at least buy it from the Jewish people because it was reflecting their sin. But the Nile was reflecting their God. And so God wanted to expose their God as a false God. So that's the idea behind this. I guess the basic takeaway that I wanted to say is that this plague represents the core of Egyptian society, a society of blood, a society that turns water into blood, a society that worships a pharaoh, a society that thought it was the most powerful society in the world, but in one moment, one instant, you see it completely shattered. And of course, this is a lesson for all of us who think that our society is strong, our society is powerful. In one moment, in one instant, our society can be torn apart. I just want to say that we'll just read one or two more verses here. The next verse says, and then we'll go into the frogs. Vayomer Hashem Moshe and Moro Aaron. God says to Moshe, say to Aaron, Kach matcha, take your staff, stretch out your hand on Mimei Mitzrayim, stretch out your hand on the waters of Egypt, al Narosam, their rivers, Yoreim, their Yaoras, maybe their larger rivers, Al Agmeim, their swamps, Al Kol Mikveh Mimeim, all of their gatherings, Viyu Dam, and it will be blood. Vaya Dam B'chol Eretz Mitzrayim, and there was blood in the whole land of Egypt. Ubayitzim uba'avanim. And also on their stones, their wood and their stones. Now, a couple of beautiful ideas in this Rashi, some beautiful ideas here. First of all, the Rashi says, why specifically was this a task for Aaron to do and not Moshe? Rashi tells us, Moshe, because the river was serving as a protective force for Moses. How so? When Moses was cast into the river protected him. And so therefore it was not struck by Moshe. Moshe could not be the one to strike the water, not with plague, not with frogs, and therefore was struck through the hands of Aaron. And the Talmud says in Baba Kama that this teaches us you can never harm anything which has once been beneficial to you. Into the well that you drank from, do not cast stones. There's the Gemara in Baba Kama 92b. And so it's to teach us this concept of gratitude, that since the well, since the water had been a source of salvation, therefore he would not be allowed to take anything from it. I want to say what is the idea that there was blood in all of the land? What does it mean there was blood in all of the land? It means to say this idea, what the commentators, a lot of them focus on is that the part of the plague was not just the effect it had on the Egyptians, but also the salutary effect it had for the Israelites, that the Israelites were successful. That the word dam is also a reference to the fact that the Israelites did not have water. And so I guess this goes to the age-old question, what do you want more? Do you want to succeed yourself, or do you want your friend to fail? I mean, this is a very, very dark thought, but that's what this midrash is hinting to. Okay, we'll take a question about this and then we'll go on to the frogs or whatever. Okay, let us go to the second plague. And the second plague is the plague of the frogs. And we have to, if the plague of the blood was pretty straightforward explanation of why that was chosen first, has to do with water, the river. What's going on with the plague of the frogs? Like, why is that chosen? So first of all, we have to ask, is it really a frog? It's not clear 100% what it is. Let's see what the text says. It says, chapter 8, or what is the word? Okay. Chapter 7, verse 26. Yomer Hashem Moshe Boa Paro, come to Paro, V'amarta love, and say to him, Komar Hashem Shalachta V'Abduni, if you don't send out my people, I will strike your people down with Sephardaim, with these Sephardaim. Visharat Hayor Tzfardaim, and these Sephardaim will be creeping all over the river. Va'alu vo b'veisecha, and they'll come into your homes. B'chadar mishkavcha, to your bedroom, amitasecha, to your beds, the base avadecha, into your the house of your servants, ubamecha, your people, tanurecha, your ovens, misharotecha, your kneading bowl, ubechol v'amchol b'kol avadecha yalu atzfardeim, and amongst you and all your servants, the frogs will go up. And just to read one more verse, Vayomer Hashem Moshe, God says to Moshe, and moral Aaron, say to Aaron, stick out your hand, and bring up the frogs on the land of Egypt. And then Aaron struck out his hand, and so here is the big question. It switches from the plural into the singular. The frog went up and it covered the land of Egypt. So we have a couple of questions. I mean, we don't really know we don't really know what kind of creature this is. What's so bad about frogs? I mean, I could put this out to you. What is the big deal? What is going on here that this is such a terrible thing? I mean, you could think about plagues, but water I understand, the plague of blood affecting the Nile. Okay, so you have frogs for a couple of days. That we're reading about 3,800 years later. So they had a few frogs in their house. I mean, they call the exterminator. What is the big deal here? Why is this such a devastating? Why is this such a devastating blow? Why is this such a devastating blow? So, anybody want to take a shot at that? Okay, so let's see. First, let me read what Rashi says that you can think about while you're thinking about answers. So, for the Rashi here that's most significant is that, first of all, it says, into your house, and only afterwards into the house of your servants, that the plague of the frogs started with Pharaoh. He started, Pharaoh started this, and he said to his people, the frogs struck him first, and only afterwards did it go to the house of your servants and to your people, you and your people. And Rashi says it went into their bellies, and it would croak even within their bellies. One more Rashi, which is very significant. Rashi says, Tzifardeh achataita. It was one frog that went up, and they were striking it, and every time they struck it, more and more frogs came out. That's the midrash. So there are two things that are powerful for me from these midrashim. One is that the frogs started with Pharaoh. And number two, they had no ability to stop it. It was just overwhelming, helpless. I think to my mind, what's going on here is that Egypt is the center of technology for the world. They're the most sophisticated. They were the ones who knew how to beat the famine. They knew how to save their crops. They knew the best technology. And Rashi says in Genesis, they knew how to preserve it properly. They thought that they were immune. They had their homes, and they thought they would be protected. They had, the river was affected, but they still had the security of being able to be in their own homes and be protected from everything else. And this punctures that. And this says, your homes are worthless. Your homes are useless. You are not able. Not only that, they were treating, it's not, I think it's intentional in the text. The Egyptians thought that the Israelites were multiplying like insects, that they were paru v'yishritzu, that they were multiplying like insects. And presumably they treated the Bnei Israel like subhuman creatures, like slaves. And they did not respect their humanity. And here we see that in place of the Israelites who were serving in their homes and serving the Egyptians, the Israelites were replaced with the frogs, meaning as if to say, you treated the Bnei Israel like insects or like rodents. We'll give you these creatures. We'll give you these creatures who are rodent-like or insect-like, or basically taking over your homes. The rabbis see tremendous inspiration from the frogs, and this is based upon the Gemara in Pesachim 53b. It says, how did Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, where did they gain the inspiration to be willing to be thrown into the furnace in the 3rd chapter of Daniel? They drew a proof a logical argument from the case of the frogs. Because the frogs, it says in verse 9 below, what does it say in the verse? It says, the frogs died in the homes, in the courtyards, in the fields. And also, that's part of the plague as well, that the frogs were just staying there in the middle of the street. You can imagine, like, if Egypt was the Paris of the ancient world, all of a sudden their society is destroyed by the frogs piling up. And the frogs represented the dedication to the task. The frogs, according to the Talmud, willingly gave up their lives in service of God. And so, but the Talmud says, it doesn't say that they died in the ovens. So therefore, because they were willing to jump into the fire, that's why Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah said, we also have to do it. But this is the idea that the frogs, on the one hand, served as an inspiration to Bnei Israel, but on the other hand, they exposed the emptiness of Egyptian society and Egyptian culture, which was a culture that thought that they were the most sophisticated, most dignified, most secure, most protected with their homes, but really they were nothing other than like insect-like or rodent-like or frog-like, in their homes. And that leads us actually to the next plague, which the first plague attacked, their center, their gods. The second plague attacked their homes, which they had felt they were secure in. And what does the third plague attack? The third plague, what does that attack? So the third plague, let's go to the third plague. And the third plague is the plague of the lice. And God said to Moshe, say to Aaron, stretch forth your hand. This is chapter 8. Oh, wait, let me just see 1 second. Let me just see. I always like to see if the Hasidic explanation is worthy to share here. Hold on. Okay. There's a lot, they talk about this a lot, but I don't want to go into that because I'd rather talk about the third plague, just the literal explanation, which is the plague of the lice, the kinim. So God says to Moshe, stretch out to Aaron, speak to Aaron, stretch out your staff, strike the earth, vayela kinim b'kol eretz Mitzrayim, will be for lice in all of the land of Egypt. And here too, by the way, just to go back to Bruce's point, it says here, why does again Aaron have to do it? Because the earth saved Moses when he killed the Egyptian, and it says he hit him in the sand. And so therefore, again, Moshe was not the one who struck the earth. It was Aaron, because he had to have gratitude. So he did this, Vayasu Cain, and so they did this. Aaron stretched out his hand and he struck the earth. And he struck the earth, and it became lice on man and animal. So this goes to the point I was saying before, and I want to make a point here about the Rashi here, which we'll see in a moment. But this goes to the idea that the first plague attacked the water, the center of their economy. The second plague attacked their secure spaces. And the third plague attacks their bodies. They think their bodies are protected. Presumably, Egyptian society was very much about their pure bodies. How do we know this? We see this from Pharaoh. He went down to the water to wash himself. And we also saw that Joseph, before he was brought to Pharaoh, he was bathed. And here all of a sudden, they're exposed as a society filled with lice, and society that was considered to be infected with this lice. The Rashi here that's significant to my mind is what the Egyptian magicians say. Egyptians did this and they were unable to draw forth the lice. And so the Egyptians said to Pharaoh, Etzba Elokim Hi. This is the finger of God. This plague represents the finger of God, and God hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he did not listen to them like he had promised. So what was it about this plague that made it be that it was seen as the finger of God? So Rashi tells us, Etzba Elokim Hi. The magician said, Maka zu eina yedei kishafim. This plague was not the result of witches. It is from God. Why? Why were they unable to do it? Rashi says, She'ein hashade sholet al birya pechuta mikisaora. A demon has no power over a creature that's less than the size of a barley corn. That they're demons, that they're Egyptians, that through their black magic, they couldn't create this. What's the point of this, Rashi? Why are we being told that suddenly the Egyptians couldn't do it? Of all the things they couldn't do, this is where it stopped. This is a theme that we see also in the Talmud as well, that the powerful forces that were persecuting the Jewish people, the Talmud tells the story of Titus after he destroyed the Beit HaMikdash, takes a boat back to Rome, and he was mocking God. And God sends into Titus's brain the smallest creature on earth, like a little maggot. And this maggot became like a parasite, attacking and just growing in his brain, and destroyed. And basically, God destroyed Titus with the smallest creature on earth. The smallest creature on earth. And that's the significance, to my mind, of the lice, the plague of the lice. Aside from the fact that there was this infestation which exposed the Egyptians as dirty or as not sophisticated, so too here, we're seeing this powerful idea that God can take down the most powerful society in the world with the smallest creature ever. And that was the louse. That was the smallest creature they know. Today we know that there are even smaller creatures, infection, viruses. But that's the idea that the smallest creature in the world can take down the most powerful society when God sends them in their direction. Hold on 1 second. So, hold on 1 second. Let's see what the Be'er Mayim Chaim says. He says, the whole point of this, he points out another idea, which actually I had skipped over, that there's another fundamental point from the plague of the Kinim. What's a fundamental point from the plague of the Kinim? The plague of the lice. The fundamental point is that there's a turning point here, because Pharaoh now is not even listening to his own advisors, because his advisors said to Pharaoh, this is the Etzba Elokim Hi. This is the finger of God. His own advisors are telling him, this is the finger of God. But Pharaoh did not listen to them. It says, V'lo shama aleihem. He did not listen to them. So now for the first time, we have Pharaoh rejecting the sound advice. That was the level of his stubbornness. That was the level of his stubbornness. So I want to just share one more commentary on this from the Kehilas Yitzchak. The Kehilas Yitzchak says that there's another counting of the plagues, and the other counting of the plagues has, and this is in the Psalms chapter 105 verse 31. It says there, Vayavo Arov Kinim B'chol Gvulam. That we have in our version of the telling of the story, we have the lice followed by the mixture of the wild beasts. But in Psalms, when this when it says in Psalms 105, it says first the mixture of wild beasts came, and then the lice. So the Kehillas Yitzchak says that's because the plague of the lice actually came twice. It came by itself as its own independent plague, and then it came again with the mixture of animals that descended. Part of that was the lice, and therefore it says arov kinim b'chol gvulam. And he then told a parable. So the parable is as follows. There was once a wealthy man who married off his daughter. Now, a few days before the wedding, he made a party for many different people. One day he made a party for the people of his household who were poor. Next day he made it for people who were Torah scholars. And then the third day he made it for just people who were poor, but they were not members of his household. So the person who was the manager of his household saw that one person came to two parties. So he said, why are you coming to two parties? So he said, because yesterday I came like one of the people who studied Torah, and the other day I came like somebody who was his relative, and now I'm coming like somebody who's just poor. And so therefore we say the same idea, even though the plague of lice came first, but in the plague of the mixed beast of animals, it came another time. And it says, Vayavo arov v'kinim kol gulam. So that's why it's combined. Now we go to this next plague. What is this next plague adding? The wild beast, the multitude, the ha'erov. What's the problem with this? This is, to my mind, the most, I don't know what the word is, but it's a very deep plague. What's the going on here with this plague? What's going on here with this plague? God says, Moshe, wake up early in the morning, stand before Paro, and go and say to him, if you will not send my people, I will send upon you and your people et ha'arov, the mixture of wild beasts. Umau batei Mitzrayim et ha'arov, v'gama ha'adama asher him aleihim. I will fill your household with a mixture of wild beasts and also the land that they're on it. So what is this adding? What is this adding? Rashi says, Esarov, Rashi says, Kol mine chayot ra'ot, all sorts of harmful beasts. Nechashim va'akrabim, snakes and scorpions. Be'erbubia, in a disordered assortment. Vayu mashchitim b'hem, they would destroy the Egyptians. So Rashi tells us, Yesh tam b'davar ba'agada, that the Midrash has a reason for this. B'kol mako mako lamazu v'lamazu. Why each plague occurred? B'tachsisei melchamot melachim ba'aleim. God came against the Egyptian using the tactics of a battle. That first, when you come on a kingdom, you take the water. First, you ruin their drinking water. Afterwards, you blow the shofar. That's like the frogs. Then after that, and that's to scare them. And then after that, you have hails of arrows, which are comparable to lice, which entered the bodies of the Egyptians like the arrows. Then foreign mercenaries are sent to them. These are like the mixtures of wild beasts. Then comes the pestilence, which is Caesar, capturing the enemy. And then you burn them out, which is boils. And then you have catapulting, which is hail. And then you come and attack by a larger army, the locusts. And if they still don't surrender, they're held in prisons, darkness. And then otherwise, they're executed. So why does Rashi cite this midrash here? It's a very big question. Commentary discussed. I think because now we have a question. It's like, what is going on with these plagues? Are they just random? And Rashi is saying, no, they're not random. Because the first three plagues we could kind of make sense. So Rashi has to tell us what this fourth plague is, how it fits in. But there's something else that's going on here. What is this plague of the mixture referring to? To my mind, there's two things going on here, two very, very powerful forces. The first one is this is not natural. You don't see, naturally speaking, an invasion by multiple different animals at the same time. This mixed multitude of animals. You don't see a bear attacking with a lion. I mean, that's not the way it works. You see, like the animals don't team up against the humans and create like a strategic attack. You don't see like the horses and it's not the George Orwell's Animal Farm. That's just not the way it works. And all of a sudden, there's like this destructive energy that the world has changed, a recognition that the world around us has changed. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, I think that this represents a fundamental attack on Egyptian society. Egypt had enslaved the Israelites. It's as though they were saying, we are who we are, and you are separate. You are different than us, and you can't be part of our society. Comes along the mixed animals, and it's saying differently. It's like defeating this concept of the hierarchical society that the Egyptians had created, and that's what I think is hinted to in this plague of Arov. Okay, let's take some questions if anybody has questions here. Yes.